Good evening. I just wanted to bring to your attention that I have social media that I'm quite active on. Instagram, Twitter, and even an email where you can submit your stories. Now let's begin. I've always been a bit of an adrenaline junkie. Always doing crazy shit that worried my parents and friends to the point of near heart attacks. My favorite activity, and one that was the most tame, was urban exploration. Sneaking into abandoned buildings, usually at night, and going wherever my curiosity and inhibition took me. Not a lot usually happened, though. I'd take some cool pictures, avoid cops or security guards. Sometimes I'd even be out all night. One night in particular, however, has been forever burned into my mind and rattled me to my very core. So much so that it stopped me from ever setting foot outside of my own studio apartment or ever being in the dark by myself. Ever again. Celestial Valley Mental Asylum. On the outskirts of the town I called home, sat the largest abandoned building in Chesterville country. It was also rumored to be the most haunted. It was a classic example of overcrowded, understaffed asylum with piss-poor care ideals. Numerous stories about it have circulated over the years, usually to scare kids from going near it, but I never believed any of it. Thought it was all bullshit. As I got older, I constantly planned to make it yet another destination I visited in the dead of night, against the wish of literally everyone else in my life. March 29th, 2019. I had taken today and tomorrow off work, since tonight was the night I ventured into Celestial Valley. I slept most of the day, waking up around 6 o'clock in the evening. I ate cold pizza as breakfast and packed a small bag with my camera, granola bars, a couple of bottles of water, my pocket knife, a small first aid kit, and a flashlight. I also put my phone in the bag, as a last resort emergency call. I'd had a few accidents in the past, so I knew to be as prepared as possible. After making sure I was well prepared for the overnight venture, I locked up my apartment and exited the dimly lit complex. I got on my bike and began the mile-and-a-half trek to the decrepit asylum. 7:30 p.m. As I'd hoped, I got to the dirt road just as the sun was hitting the horizon. I put one foot on the ground and glanced at the withering wooden sign. Painted, almost completely chipped and peeled off, making it hard to read. I then looked down the long dirt road that led to the asylum. The building was once a brilliant, perfect white, but now spotted with rust and chipped paint. It was easily 3 or 4 stories tall, and was overgrown with ivy and some other foliage that decided to make themselves at home on the outer walls. Most of the windows had been shattered or covered by 2x4s. I was suddenly overcome with a sense of unease, which I quickly shook off. None of those stupid stories are real, I scolded myself. It's just another abandoned building. I biked my way up the road, finding a massive bush to hide my bike and jogging the rest of the way up. After searching for the better part of 15 minutes, I finally found a way in through a broken window. I threw my hair up in a ponytail and gingerly tossed my bag inside before climbing up the ledge and jumping through the space. My nose was suddenly assaulted by the musky, dank smell that came with most aged buildings. But this was different. It smelled almost sickly sweet, like death. It made me want to vomit. I looked around, golden sunlight illuminating parts of the building. Clearly, I hadn't been the only one to sneak in here. Graffiti coated the walls like a quilt. All sorts of different numbers, symbols. I think I even recognized a few band logos too. What caught me off guard though was the large symbol on one untouched wall. It evoked anger and malice, and would look cruel to even the most sadistic minds. It didn't really look like it was written with spray paint. Shaking my head, I picked up my bag and decided to delve deeper into the building, going down the first hallway I saw. It all looked like something straight out of a horror movie. There was the occasional gurney against the wall, papers on the floor. I couldn't help but roll my eyes a little. I glanced at the walls, which looked similar to the building's exterior. I had to admit, for all the horror stories that were told about this place, I was a little... I froze, eyes widening as I whipped around so fast I actually got dizzy. Once I steadied myself, I was shocked to see the gurney I was now a good 10 or 15 feet away from on its side, one of its wheels swinging gently from the impact. My brain tried to piece together what could have happened, but when I couldn't, I simply kept walking. My feet picked up the pace a little as I removed my bag from my shoulder, pulling out my phone and putting on some music. Despite not seeing any cops or security, I kept the volume low, anything to fill the void of silence and calm my pounding heart. 9:45 p.m. I've only just now found a staircase that led to the second floor. Damn, this place was bigger than I thought. At least I'd gotten some cool pictures. Nothing else too creepy had happened, aside from the occasional breeze creating an odd whistling noise. Sun had long since set, so I was using my flashlight to navigate the cobweb and mold-ridden duty halls. My music kept softly playing as I turned a corner. Stopping dead in my tracks is what I saw. The hallway looked strangely clean, pristine. There wasn't a single speck of dirt in sight, and it was fairly well lit. Still, it remained empty, void of any signs of life. That is, until I took another step forward. Suddenly, the hall was filled with people. Half of them strained to gurneys. Doctors shoved patients around from room to room, some of them screaming like deranged animals. Those weren't strapped down were trudging around like mindless zombies. It left me frozen with shock and confusion. What the fuck was going on? Hey, I managed, but it fell on deaf ears. Suddenly it seemed as if everyone was slowly filing into different rooms within the hallways. Before I could call it again, all the doors slammed shut simultaneously. I jolted violently out of being startled, and I was brought back to a dark, damp, musty hallway. I looked down, noticing my flashlight was now on the floor. I reached down, picking it up and brushing it off with a shaky hand. Calm down, Leslie. It must have been a hallucination from hunger or dehydration, maybe, I told myself, but it didn't sound very convincing. I decided to venture back to the first floor, feeling I'd done enough exploring on the second floor for now. 12:15 a.m., March 30th, 2019. I guess I did a fairly shit job of exploring this place. I walked into one room and it led to another series of hallways. Only these looked a bit cleaner, like someone had been here recently. The feeling of unease suddenly grew exponentially, and my gut was telling me to turn back and get out. Wiping some sweat from my forehead, I took careful steps down the hallway, ignoring the feeling, constantly looking around me. Leslie, came in a distorted, sing-song voice. I whirled around, shining my light in all possible directions around me, but nothing was there. I huffed quietly in frustration, shaking my head and turning back to face the direction I was heading in. My mind was clearly playing tricks on me, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. As I continued down the hall, I was caught off guard by an awful smell, one I could only recognize as the smell I noticed when I first entered the place. I made a face, feeling my stomach churn as I pressed on. I lowered my flashlight from straight ahead of me towards the floor, keeping an eye out for dead animals that could be the source of the odor. I turned a corner, freezing. Ahead of me was a large room, but there was light coming from it. I quickly shut off my flashlight and turned off my music, putting the flashlight in my back pocket before carefully stepping forward. Worst case scenario was that it was the cops, but I could just book it out of here if it was. Suddenly, I felt my foot step on something liquid. Confused, I looked down, seeing a dark puddle. Carefully reached down, sticking a couple of fingers in it. It doesn't feel like water, I thought. Feeling bold, I shone the light of my phone on my hand. God, I wish I hadn't. The liquid was dark red. It didn't take me very long to figure out what it was. Felt my head spinning as I wiped the blood on my shorts. Why is there blood here? Was it animals or was it... A tortured scream pierced the air. My head shot up as I recognized it was coming from the lit room. Okay, definitely not cops in there. I stood up straight, carefully walking towards the room as I pulled my knife from my front pocket. I flipped it open and held it defensively as I snuck up to the doorway, hiding off to the side and poking my head in. I really wish I had turned and left. First thing I noticed were the numerous candles that adorned the room. Then I noticed 5 or 6 hooded figures that all stood in a circle. They were all speaking a language I could only assume to be Latin, which sent a dangerous chill down my spine. Last 2 things I saw, probably the most haunting, were the pentagram and the girl that laid in the center. She had to be no older than me, maybe 21 or 23 at most. She had long blonde hair and she was naked, tied down to the ground with a pentagram carved into her flesh, surrounded by symbols that gave off a feeling of wrong. She trembled, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Please, please let me go," she begged. Her plea fell on deaf ears, chanting slowly getting louder. I looked around the room again, spotting something I hadn't noticed before. A massive goat's head, horns curling before pointing upwards. It was hung on the walls, its black, beady eyes boring into my very soul. Blood dripped from the clean cut, creating a small puddle on the concrete floor. Another scream came from the girl, which ripped my attention from the goat back to her. I watched in horror as one of the hooded figures carved into her skin, but I couldn't see what it was. Her screams turned into shrieks and painful sobs, making my heart pound in my throat. Tears of my own stinging my eyes. At the same time, I wanted to throw up. Finally, the figure moved, revealing the same symbol from the front carved into the poor girl's flesh. The room became filled with an aura of pure darkness as crimson blood ran from her body and pooled at her side. Her skin was pale, tears continuing to flow from her cheeks, forming puddles on the sides of her head. Chanting grew louder and I felt the earth tremble. I looked around the room, eyes going back to the goat. Its maw was now open, blood dripping from it. I felt my face drain of all colors as I felt the head captivate me in its horrid gaze. It boomed, a voice deep and distorted, like it was coming from Satan himself. I turned and booked it from the room, not giving a shit about how loud I was about it. I didn't bother to look back, but I swear to God I heard footsteps or hooves or something chasing me. It only made my feet carry me faster, skidding around corners until I reached the window I came from. I leapt through, tucking and rolling into the dirt with a grunt. I stood looking behind me as I tried to catch my breath. I saw a dark, hulky figure running towards the window. It let out an unnatural bellow, like it was trapped in the asylum. As I took off again, sprinting into the bush that hid my bike, I grabbed it and hopped on, pedaling as fast as my feet would go. I almost crashed my bike 3 times before making it onto the road, speeding away from Celestial Valley Mental Asylum. 3:30 a.m. I finally walked into my apartment, the door gently slamming behind me. I turned on the lights before I collapsed to the floor, letting out a broken, pitiful whimper. The adrenaline was gone. Now it was time for the fear and shock to take over. My body trembled on the carpeted floor as tears fell. Images of whatever the fuck I witnessed flashed through my mind. What the fuck? What the fuck? I sobbed.